Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the first continuing education class of the year, how to create pollinator garden corridor, with Kathy Sykes. Kathy, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited that you're here to kick off our season. I'm going to pass it over to you. Feel free to share your screen while I slowly let people in. Okay. You want to say too?
No.
Where's Kathy?
Uh-huh.
I'm right there. The slides are coming up. Perfect. Thank you. If anybody has any questions while we're going through her slides, feel free to chat box. And all right, here we go. Okay. Well, my name is Kathy Sykes, and I'm going to tell you today on how to create a pollinator corridor. So first, I think we need to all, as gardeners, take the Hippocratic Oath. As they do for medicine, they should for the garden. In gardening, we should do no harm. And beyond that, we should restore nature. A recent United Nations report on pollinators found that 1 million species face extinction. And the UN report went on to say that humans will suffer as a result. And that's really important. This United Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services was signed by 132 nations, including the United States. Further, the threat of extinction of all known insects is up to 40%. Whereas maybe we can silence, I don't know if you can come, but anyway, the threat.
I think you muted everyone, including Kathy.
Yes, I'm trying to unmute Kathy. Kathy, you're muted. Can you please unmute yourself? But everybody else is now muted.
I'll try it again.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
So I'll try it again. The threat of extinction is 40% of all known insect species are at threat. And they are in descending order from the most at threat, most at risk. Starts with the butterflies and moths, then the bees, wasps, ants, and sawflies from the Hymenoptera species or order, and then dung beetles, who are actually really critical for getting E. coli buried in the ground. The UN said this is an unprecedented bug massacre that's coming our way. And there was a cover at National Geographic recently that said, "You'll miss them when they're gone," referring to the insects. So they're very important, as you all know. So what are some of the causes of the decline of our pollinators? Well, first, it's due to the habitat loss, mainly due to intensive agriculture, but also land conversion for the cities and expansion of what used to be, like in our area, woodlands. Also chemical pollutants, and I'll talk about pesticides later, invasive species, climate change, and many other factors. But we can help. That's the really important message here. We can urge governments to tackle important things like climate change and the loss of biodiversity. And I will say, in the $1 trillion bill that was passed last November, there is money to address invasives in the Department of Transportation's budget. And there is a $10 million for the next 5 years grants to deal with pollinator corridors too. So that's kind of really good news, but haven't got a lot of information down to DC yet on how they're going to handle that money. The next thing is we can plant native plants and keystone plants that I'll talk about later in this presentation. And we can create a pollinator corridor or a section somewhere in our city, or what Doug Tallamy refers to as the homegrown national park. So here's just some pictures of some places that, you know, were totally empty and what we converted it. So this is what I'm going to talk about, how we did this. The most important thing is this positive intervention that we as gardeners, master gardeners, can do. We can help restore the ecosystems and make room for the orb spider. And I named this little one over here on the right Gucci. And she is an orb spider
that makes a new web, a new silk web every single day. And she's super beneficial for the garden because she eats mosquitoes and other beetles that harm our plants or us. So very important. So the importance of pollination is that, as you probably know, it's animal-mediated pollination is the essential process, and it forms the basis for the Earth's biodiversity. And pollination, as you all know, is the transfer of pollen from the one flower to another, and it's critical for flowering plants to cross-fertilize, to produce seed and food, the food we eat. Benefits of pollinators also include, they're a natural pest control system. They sequester carbon. This is very important for climate change. They help retain rainwater. And in our corridor where we live in the East Coast, we're having greater and greater rainfall at a greater amounts. So we really need these plants and pollinators here. And finally, I call them the little dancers, all the little butterflies and bees and birds that float around. We need them, and they're very beneficial to us. They're also essential for the food we eat. 75% of native plants require pollination by an animal, insect, but it's usually a native bee. 1 out of 3 bites we chew require a pollinator to have pollinated the plant. And the US economy values pollinators at $34 billion a year. That's quite amazing, $34 billion. Some other benefits for the flowering plants and pollination. Well, plants help clean the air. They help sequester carbon. They also help clean the water and soil. They help purify water, prevent erosion, the roots hold in place the soil so we don't have erosion. And the water cycle depends on plants to return moisture to the atmosphere. And plants depend on pollinators to help them reproduce. Flowering plants and bees interact closely. And one thing that doesn't mix with insects or plants are pesticides. Pesticides is the general category for herbicides and insecticides and so forth. And they are very harmful to the ecosystem, and they have unintended victims, mainly are insects. Herbaceous plants are the most susceptible to the insecticides and also the herbicides, and they're not very healthy for people either. Now, I hope some of you have read this wonderful book, this bestseller, Nature's Best Hope by Doug Tallamy, who is an entomologist at the University of Delaware. But he talks about the small efforts that many of us can deliver, the enormous benefits and beauty to all by conserving what we can where we live. So where do we start? Where can we build a corridor? 86% of the land east of the Mississippi has been developed. Therefore, we must move to private space. So in our area, the whole United States actually, lawns dominate the landscape. And turf grass has replaced the native plant community. And I'll give you an example in Maryland. Maryland, 1.1 acres of lawn exist. That's more lawn than the combined areas of all the state parks, of all the forests and wildlife preserves in Maryland. So the Greater Washington reported that DC is 68 square miles and 50% of the land has buildings on it and 25% has road infrastructure. So that's 75% that we can't touch, but there's still room. Another little problem with the lawns that we have is that on the East Coast during the summer, 30% of all the water that's used is for watering the lawns. 40% of the chemicals that are used on lawns in the United States are banned in other countries because they're not safe or they cause cancer. And 40 to 60% of fertilizers applied to lawns end up in our groundwater, our surface water. They kill aquatic life and they contaminate our drinking water. Not a good thing. So one of the key messages from this book was that keystone plants are really important. So what are keystone plants? The term keystone came from Robert Payne's classic definition of a keystone,
item that disproportionately affects a very large abundance of diversity on the ecosystem. So the keystone plants and trees that I'll be talking about are going to be very important for us to take notice of and try to plant. It's not just about biodiversity. We definitely have to be strategic. And here's a statistic that might help you get the sense. 5% of local plants host about 3/4 of all the butterflies and moths. And I'll tell you why butterflies, I should say the caterpillar stage, are super important to the bird life. So if we remove keystone plants, the ecosystem collapses. Okay. So why do we need caterpillars? Believe it or not, birds don't eat worms, except for robins. Parent birds, 96% of all species feed their babies caterpillars. And why do they do that? Because they're easy to feed. They're soft and mushy. And if you've ever seen a parent bird shove the food down the baby's mouth, it better not be sharp like a beetle. It also is high in protein and fat. And basically the choice that a parent bird would have is to choose between catching 200 aphids to get the same number of calories and benefits or one caterpillar. And sometimes these birds have to make like 100 or 150 trips a day while those little babies are nesting in the nest. So that's a lot of trips. So in our mid-Atlantic area, the keystone key plants, the mighty oak tree, is the host of 557 different moth and butterfly species. That is unbelievable, 557. Actually, that's also the main tree for the lower 48 states. Asters and goldenrods and sunflowers are the herbaceous plants that are the keystone plants, hosting many, not as many as the oak tree, but they're super important. So if you plant these keystones, you're well on your way to contributing to the homegrown national park that I'll talk about too. Another important study that Doug Talamay did in his book, or I talked about in his book, was that he found what the breakpoint is to replace the current population of native pollinators. And he found, and his colleagues, that you need to plant at least 70% native plants in your yard or your corridor or wherever you're planting to ensure a replacement population. In other words, you won't lose ground, you won't gain ground, but if 70% of your plants are natives, you'll be fine. Less than that, you're going to have be contributing to that demise that we see that's coming due to many other issues. So that's a good number to remember. 7 out of 10 plants have to be natives. So let's look at our little pollinators here. The rusty patch bumblebee is now on the endangered species list. I'm not sure if this is one because I can't identify him, but let's just pretend it is for a moment. He's endangered, but if we plant for him, we can help save him. And he does love, the rusty patch bumblebee does love coneflowers and baptista and hyssop and wild lupin too. So you can help take care of this guy by planting what he loves. That's also true for swallowtails. This black swallowtail, believe it or not, loves the host plant parsley. So you could plant parsley and still get this guy to show up. I should say, the swallowtail also lays its eggs on milkweed and zinnias. So zinnias are one of our annuals. The ecosystem is also critical for the birds. So the plants and trees that we plant are also critical to them. We can reshape and enhance their environment and help birds at the same time. So now I'm going to refer to a bunch of websites and show you the spreadsheets that I work on to help figure out what to plant. And it's not that complicated, but this is a screenshot of the National Wildlife Federation. And I've got, again, this link for you later on a handout, Plant Finder. And you can see here, and they have them in descending order, the most species attracted to the least. And for just these first 12, you can see goldenrod is at the top, and 63 different species. And then you can see the sunflower has 49 different species that it can host. And then down at the bottom, the lupin still has like 23 or 24. I can't quite read it, but this helps us tell if we're getting the right plant to our community. Now, witch hazel, which is a small tree, can host 15 different species of bird, including the mockingbird on the right there. 15 different species, but goldenrod, soldado, can also host even more, 18 species, and is a host for native honeybees. Don't confuse goldenrod with ragweed. It does not cause allergies. This is they even bloom at different times. So this is goldenrod. This is a picture of one of the species of goldenrod. So where do we begin? There's an African proverb that I am a strong believer in. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so from the beginning of my work that we have done in our neighborhood, I have found partners to help make that happen, make the pollinator corridor happen. I started with the Van Ness Main Street. There's main streets throughout the city of DC, but Van Ness Main Street has been very instrumental in helping this project. The Forest Hills Connection, which is an online newspaper, has also been extremely helpful, as has the advisory neighborhood commissioners with funding, believe it or not, too, that have been really helpful in supporting the corridor. Many different kinds of groups, but you can think of the environmental groups in your neighborhood or in the city, faith-based groups, schools and students, the high school kids that need to get their hours for community service are also a great resource. Master gardeners, like those of you on this call, and neighbors, and lots of new neighbors that have moved to DC in the neighborhood recently have also come out to help in the garden, the pollinator garden. The value of partners, again, priceless, but they're a source of volunteers. They help with outreach and social media. They have maybe lists and mailings that go out to folks or websites that tell people about when there's events. They can help with funding. They can engage with the local community and businesses and folks locally. They can help with the site selection. They even be responsible to saying, hey, we really need to do something here. But it's also really community building. So I think this is really critical for doing what we're trying to accomplish as a group. And of course, volunteers come in all ages and experience, but the most important thing is that we share the same commitment to trying to make our neighborhood more beautiful and more supportive of the pollinators and the whole food web. So now I'm going to go through one by one the steps that I think are critical for coming up with a corridor. And a corridor could also just be a plot of land, and I'll show you that. But here are the 6 steps. The first one is site selection. I'm sure you live in a place where there's something that looks like the left and the right, where there's gravel, grass, almost no grass, but it looks like it's, just kind of a vacant place. These are tree boxes in the neighborhood. And then I've seen even rubberized tree boxes covered. I go, I can't believe this, but you need to look for a place that's needed to beautify and also recreate home for the pollinators. And a place that has no pervious surface can also benefit from planters. We can create a little bit of soil plots there and benefit the pollinators. This is a parking lot behind Bread First that we helped add some more green space to. And just to let you know, if you were wondering, is it safe to put pollinators near the street? Indeed, there is a peer-reviewed article that talks about roadside verges that do aid pollinators, and they're just defined as a strip of land between the roadside and the fence, hedge, or an adjacent wall. And pollinators survive in these areas. So you don't have to read all the little pictures, but I have the reference if you want to look into the study afterwards. Step 2, very important job, which is removing the invasive species. There's a devastating impact on native species caused by, or that caused the decline of, or even extinction of many native species. These native invasive plants are alien and they establish outside of their natural habitat. They reproduce rapidly and they outcompete natives for food, water, and space. So what is an invasive plant? Here's the definition by the USDA. Invasives are both non-native and able to establish on many sites. They grow quickly and spread to the point of disrupting plant communities or ecosystems. The invasive plant also produces abundantly, easily, disperses its seeds, and are resilient. They reproduce by roots, stems, and seeds. They release chemicals that inhibit the growth of or kill nearby natives. And they have few predators. That's why they're so successful. And ivy can kill trees too. I have it on a master sheet at the end, resources, a list of the DC invasive plants to pollinators. Maryland and Virginia have more extensive lists. And I'll tell you that there's the Weed Warrior program that's going to start up again in April with the National Park Service. And here's my fellow master gardener friend, John, who is at Hillwood. And we've been working since, I think, December, pulling ivy out of a huge area to try to save the trees and save the natives plants. Another invasive plant I want to bring up is actually poisonous to birds, Nandina, which if your neighborhood is like my neighborhood, it's everywhere. I think it was super popular to plant in the 60s, and so it's everywhere. Unfortunately, its berries contain cyanide. And I'll just say that there was a peer-reviewed study that they found out about like a dozen cedar waxwings had died in Georgia some years back, not too many years ago. And when they did autopsies on their bellies, they found out the only thing that was in their stomach was these berries, these red berries, and they contained the cyanide, and that was the poison that killed them. Since 2017, Maryland has required this sign that my head's sort of on, that says plant with caution. So they don't say don't plant, but they have to have that sign saying that other invasive plants too, that they warn you that this is an invasive. So if somebody says, I really like my red berries on Nandina, you could tell them, well, why don't you choose winterberry instead? So here's a native alternative that's not invasive. The other area that needs help all the time is to remove what I call the useless dead zone of turf grass. If we could remove grass, we'd be a lot, as you can see on the right-hand side, we're well on our way to creating a pollinator corridor. Step 3, we have to add soil. Most importantly, remove grass, rocks, and if you're in the tree box, it might be construction trash. And then rejuvenate the soil by adding like 4 to 6 inches. I just, from the master gardening class, learned about leaf grow, which is actually just made of composted leaves and grass, nothing more, no fertilizer. But you probably will need to get something that's fluffier than the compressed soil that's pretty much down in the tree boxes, if that's where you're working. Number 4, avoid chemicals at all costs. Pesticides kill, and they kill not just what they're supposed to get, but everything else that's there that are beneficial too. They're not that targeted. Spray of chemicals too, it strays, and it can also enter our groundwater. So there's a lot of things, a lot of good reasons not to use fertilizers. And sadly too, a lot of the fertilizers that we add to our soil, believe it or not, people do, are filled with nitrogen-loving invasive plants. So what we add actually contributes or helps non-natives. So that's another good reason not to use fertilizers. The other important thing to remember is mosquito bombs are also toxic. And if you ever read Rachel Carson's book, you'll know that DDT and so forth, this is bad for everybody, and not just mosquitoes die when it's sprayed. So avoid them. An important tip is that there are plants that can repel mosquitoes, and they include marigolds, rosemary, lavender, and so on. And what's important to note is that those first 3, marigolds, rosemary, and lavender, are also things that don't appeal to rodents. So if you want to keep away rodents and mosquitoes from your garden area, plant marigolds, plant rosemary or lavender, or all of them. There's also natural defenders that we need, beneficial bugs. Got aphids? Get ladybugs. They're a predator insect and they can help your garden.
Or you can just use the hose and blast off the aphids multiple times until they go away. If they come back, just blast them again with the hose. Another thing that I've seen now that we're still sort of in the winter has been over salting sidewalks with what people sometimes just think is salt, but many times it's got other hazardous materials in it, as was in front of where I live, that was applied like a carpet by our contractors. And in front of UDC Law School in the middle there, it was very heavy. Fortunately, they didn't have hazardous stuff in there, but it's done a number on the landscape, on the cementscape, and as you can see in the garden area too, all those little white specks don't belong there. And that's also where we've got little baby spiders and moths and butterflies that are resting for the winter. The fifth step in helping create a pollinator corridor or an area in your garden is to plant a tree. And this is probably one of the most important things you can do if that's all you do. And the good news is this is free. You can go online to DCDOEE and request a tree. They'll make a visit and then they'll schedule a time to plant a tree or two, or as much room as you have. So what I would also tell you is DC has 2 million trees. We have this goal of getting to 40% canopy by 2032. And unfortunately, maybe with the weather, with the climate change and so forth, we've actually been losing ground even after setting up that metric to try to improve the coverage. But it's a free resource and I highly recommend you to get one. I actually got paid for a permit years ago. They had to pay for to plant this tree in memory of my mother, a red bud. Step 6 is the fun part, I think, and that's choosing to plant natives, avoiding the invasive ones for sure. But as you can see, we can work with seeds inexpensively. We can go to buy little seedlings as well. We can choose annual, perennial, again, focusing on who is this a host plant for. We want seasonal coverage. We want to have evergreen. We want ground covers. We want vines. Bulbs may take us into the 30% of the non-natives, but there are some native bulbs too, and herbs. Again, the planting time for our zone 7, we may have already planted last September through November, our spring bulbs that should be emerging soon, I hope. And then we can start planting fall bulbs that will appear in fall in the springtime. So again, going back to that 70% natives, again, a lot of these plants listed here will probably be on the non-native list, but they're beautiful and you may still want them in your garden. And here's your first test. You guys can put in the chat box, which one is not native? Now I'll say, you're right, the daffodil. Although I have daffodils in my garden, so you can still plant them as part of your 30%, but the turtle head and the columbine, you choose the native one, they are native here. So some of the useful websites that I'm now going to talk about, you guys probably all know about the Missouri Botanical Garden Plant Finder. This is where I get a lot of my information for the spreadsheets that I then organize to figure out what I need. Again, the National Wildlife Federation has the Native Plant Finder. They also have wild bees, and then Audubon has the same for birds. These spreadsheets that I do, you can organize based on what your needs are. You know, do you want to have a mix of perennial and annual? You can find the exact Latin name to make sure you're getting the native. You can see what pollinators they attract, or if you're trying to save the rusty bumblebee, what host plants will work for that? Do you have lots of sun? Do you have shade? How much room do you have vertically or by breadth? The colors, of course, are important. The bloom time are critical for the bees. How much water do you have? And some plants need a lot more than others. And then the care. I aim for low maintenance because it's a huge area that we're working to improve. So when you're selecting first, let's say a native tree, and I just threw up 3, in the mighty oak, you can see it attracts over 500 different species of caterpillars. Red buds attract hummingbirds, that's kind of cool. And dogwoods, native ones, attract birds and butterflies. But you can see other information, for instance, when do they bloom? Like the white oak is later. They're obviously a very different flower. The red bud is a shorter period of time in April.
and the dogwood is for a couple months. So this is just a quick way to organize things. Now, maybe I want to look at sunlight. It's really important. I have a full sun area that I'm trying to fill. So at the bottom of the list, the asters and lupin and hyssop and goldenrod are wonderful. If I've got more shade, I might be going for the blue false indigo. All of these attract pollinators. And then I can see how much has low care versus medium care. I don't have any high care on here. I also may want to sort for different heights, the smallest to the tallest. I want to make sure we've got ground cover, the little pussy toes that don't get any higher than a 1 foot. But then we've got Joe Pyeweed or swamp milkweed that can get over 5 feet. So that's really important for certain monarchs, for example. Notice the color. You're gonna, see different colors at different months and see, what you might want to see to beautify in the terms of color. And then remember that the bees need pollen and nectar year round for their life. So the green, the pink, and the brown kind of help me show seasonally. I might want to pick a few from the green category, a few from the pink, and a few from the brown to have continuous food for the bees.
Okay.
Also, notice the texture of leaves because they're going to be around a lot longer than the blooms are. So in this, you can see the monarda with the bees on the left, but those beautiful purple flowers aren't there year round, but those big, beautiful heart leaves are. And if you think of fennel or dill, the feathery look, or you can have other grasses that don't have flowers at all that you can kind of see up here. But just, you want to think color, you want to think height, and you want to fill in, which I'll talk about too, as much as possible so you don't leave room for weeds. You can create seasonal looks, little snowdrops. That's about all that comes up this time, soon, right now, fall color. And here's more shaded area with even some ferns. And this was my 97-year-old friend who let me convert his front lawn into a garden. I'm still fighting the ivy back here. Here's some beautiful plants, one for winter. The red twig dogwood kind of stands out alone as the only thing blooming. And in the summer, the hibiscus is actually so stunning and attracts lots of pollinators. So what would you plant? The butterfly bush or the butterfly weed? I'm sure you all said butterfly weed, which is the one on the right, because the butterfly bush, while full-grown butterflies come to it, it's actually an invasive pollinator plant, and it's on my list from DC as an invasive. So we don't want to plant this one, even though it's beautiful. We'd rather do this. And the names, I will also tell you, confuse us because many things called weeds are the opposite. They're actually the good one. So now I'm going to talk about a few random thoughts because they didn't quite fit into my 6 points, but I think they're really important. Wherever you're planting, is there going to be a water source? Is there an outside spigot? The design plan, thinking about layers, thinking about LED lights or, yellow light bulbs or something that's got motion detector, thinking about leaves and signage, where to find plants and seeds, and then also leaving no room for weeds. So the new perennial movement that the gentleman from Netherlands who actually designed the High Line in New York City, if you've ever seen it, which is spectacular, or the Lurie Garden in Chicago in the Millennium Park, it's really wonderful. And I highly recommend you go to the Smithsonian Gardens that have many different beautiful native gardens and American Indian gardens of how things used to look in our area, and even the trees, just to see what's around and what it can grow in our area. Grasses, the ornamental grasses can help establish the matrix. The perennials help us give us the structure, and be sure to have lots and lots of ground cover so we don't leave room for weeds. Try to mimic what's found in nature naturally. Take a walk in the woods, see how close plants are planted together. And the benefits of a matrix design actually helps encourage biodiversity, less maintenance, less work, self-sustaining, saves time. I'm all for that. It increases soil fertility. No mow, isn't that great? Fewer weeds. You can retain and conserve more water, less watering, multi-seasonal, and you've got built-in disease pest resistant plants. Again, planning, you may want to lay things out. You take your matrix layout, but then have
right in front of your volunteers. You may have them help lay out what the colors, the height, to look, to see, and close together how everything's going to look before you put it in the ground. Again, looking at the leaf texture, the height of the plant, the color, and you can see where these two people, the couple, are standing. We're going to make sure that there's room for doors to open, because this is a place where people might be getting out of their car next to the street. So I always leave a strip there for people to walk out. And if we're on a big tree box, we make sure that there's a place for people to cross from the street, maybe people to deliver, let's say, liquor to the liquor store or something, but we leave paths and try to have the rest of the garden remain untouched. So again, think big and small, trees and shrubs, herbaceous plants, ground cover, all the different levels of where little bugs live. Think too about the little caterpillars that will be dropped down from underneath a tree. Don't leave hard cement or hard turf grass. Give them a nice gentle fall to a little shrub or little plants. Again, in the forest, there's like a little buffer between the ground and where they're going to end up. I even have created temporary gardens when we've lost huge trees that weren't planned to be replaced. In the meantime, this little island that's right near Calvert Woodley, we planted wildflowers, annuals and perennials, until a new tree could be planted. It's still part of a huge reconstruction in the area. So in the meantime, we don't have to have these blighted, empty lots. We can bring beauty to even places where we're mourning the lost big tree. LED streetlights are very harmful to lots of nocturnal insects. They are harmful to glowworms and many other things. Because of their white light, they actually can blind insects that move around at night. The yellow glow lights are much better on the left-hand side. The motion detection lights can actually help you limit the amount of disturbance to the night sky too. That can actually help maybe a few more caterpillars or moths survive bats having a great time around the light. Leave the leaves. That's almost all I have to say, but leave the leaves. It's free, it's natural fertilizer. Don't mess it up, don't cut it up. It's the winter habitat for invisible, minuscule little caterpillar baby eggs, spider eggs, and other beneficial insects. And when we use those, I'll show you, blowers, if you look like this team of people destroying the universe, they generate dust and air pollutants. But it's not only that, that dust contains potentially dangerous substances, including pesticides, mildew, animal fecal matter. It also compacts down the soil, which increases water runoff. That's the last thing we need. And it also can cause irritation, allergies, and many other health issues for people, not just the ones using the blowers, but people in the community. Just put them down. We really don't need them. I'm glad we got rid of the gas-powered ones, but we really don't need these. And we're really harming all of the pollinators we're trying to protect and attract. I know. Please encourage everyone to pick up after their pets. It's terrible. The EPA even calls the dog doo-doo a pollutant. It's very harmful because of the nutrients and bacteria that's in them, in this, and it gets in our waterway. And actually the Chesapeake Bay Foundation has said that dog waste is the main source of pollution in the Chesapeake Bay. It's also responsible for algal blooms too, packed with nitrogen and phosphorus. And that also includes dog pee. So the don't pollute, scoop the poop was a sign that was made by our director of the Forest Hills Connection, Marlene Berlin. Dogs in DC make about 44 million pounds of poop each year, and that's roughly the weight of 4 Capitol domes. So every scoop matters, and maybe we have to do some more education through signs. DOEE has some information. Philadelphia has an incredible website if you want to look at what they're doing to try to educate the public on this matter. And we're having more and more dogs. And I don't know about your building. I live in a co-op where almost everyone went from no dogs to 3. So I think signs can help educate. And I think there's a lot of people who unfortunately haven't become master gardeners, but would benefit if they did. So I put up the sign when a lot of my
what we planted, sunflowers, the heads were being taken off, I think, for seeds. But if we leave them, that's a food source for the birds in the winter. And we had a pretty cold winter. So some of these remained, some did not, but I think more people know about this and have told me that they read the signs. Here's Mary Beth, who I work with in the DC roof garden. She helped put together these signs that are available from Beyond Pesticides that just say pesticide free zone. And we're giving them, I think, to some of the schools and the whole corridor where I'm working, which I think they're very attractive and hopefully keep sending the message about we don't need pesticides or spraying. This little sign I made after people were breaking the branch of the tree that I had planted in memory of my mother. And I thought, what people probably don't know, they may feel it's in their way, but when you break the surface of the branch, you're going to allow bacteria or viruses or insects in there, and that can actually harm the plant or even kill it. So hopefully people know that. When I put up the sign, I haven't had as many people breaking off the branches. Now we've had it trimmed, from the city folks and so forth, but it's still, is going to stick out a little bit until it gets a little bit bigger. And I'll just say, go native. You've got lots of good resources in our community. We've got Birdie Bacchus, which is with UDC. They've got over 30 natives that I think for certain projects are free. You can pick them up. I've used the Prairie Moon Nursery ordering seeds online. There's Chesapeake Bay, the Chesapeake natives locally in Marlborough, Maryland. ISIL plants, you can buy big flats. This is if you need to buy a lot of plants, but they have big flats available at incredibly cheaper cost because it's the wholesale cost. So I may be trying to get a whole bunch of ornamental grasses and try to see if some of you guys want to plant some of them where you are working too. So I just want to say thank you. You can do it. Our councilwoman, Mary Chey, has been very supportive. She's now not running again, but she's been very supportive in her positions in DC local government. And I will say that you will have this one pager, and I don't know is this going to be just, I think it's going to be sent out to all of you after this lecture too, of the key websites. Many of you know some of them, but just so you have them and you can go straight to the sources, for example, of all the invasive lists from Maryland, and Virginia, and the DC only invasive pollinator list. I have some of our partners that have been, a lot of articles are useful that we've put into the newspaper and our online Forest Hills Connection. There's also information about the weed warriors that I guess, again, in April will be available to everybody who wants to sign up to help learn how to remove weeds safely. And you can go into any park and do it then. And also I wanted to tell you the book, I highly, if you haven't read it, that would be my recommendation. Read Doug Talamay's Nature's Best Hope. There's also a website that has information from the Chesapeake Bay about pet waste, and then some of the resources from the references from my talk today. You can just go there quickly and see press stories or actually the peer-reviewed study. And I'm happy to entertain questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathy. That was amazing. Do you want me to read some questions out to you, or
Sure.
do you just want to look at the chat box yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
You can read them off to me.
All right. First, a couple of people are interested. Would you be willing to share your slides?
Of course, of course.
Perfect. So
I think it's so big because there's so many photos that I'll have to turn it into a PDF, but I don't have any information on I didn't write in the Word pages or whatever you call it, the note page. So I think you'll still see everything.
That's fine. I can save it as a PDF and compress it so it's a smaller file, and I'll share it with everyone with the handout.
Absolutely.
There are a difference of part shade or, oh, okay, that's not a question. Sorry. Where are some good local resources for seeds and seedlings?
Well, I think you can get stuff both at the Prairie Moon Nursery and locally, sorry, Chesapeake Natives, Birdie Bacchus. I will put in a plug for American Plant. They organize their plants by being native and non-native, and that for me is very helpful too. The ISIL, again, plants, they have huge flats if you want to buy wholesale, but they have the little plums too.
Perfect, thank you. A couple of people asked, could you please expand on what matrix design is, the meaning of matrix design?
Okay, so the picture, let's see if I can go back to my slide. It'll maybe be easier to see. I'm far from an expert on this stuff, but you can kind of, here it is. So they've got wildflowers and grasses. So the L, let's just take the L, is a palm sedge. So here's the palm sedges that they've kind of put around. It's like almost a triangle. They're kind of, it's not all in straight lines, I guess is the easiest way to say it. But they're choosing not a huge number of plants. I know my head's right in the middle of this. Let's see which way I can go. So you choose different plants that'll be in certain places. There's, I think we always have used the idea of odd numbers, but this is supposed to be 9 feet by 4.5 feet. And you can see they put closely together many different kinds of sedges and grasses, but at the same time, they've combined here, A is columbine. So wherever I can find the letter A, which I can't see now because it's such a small thing. But anyway, Jack in the Pulpit, they've got woodland asters. So they've mixed a whole bunch of different native plants in a very small area and actually they say the goal here was they've got a partial shade area, but you're going to have not lines, you're not going to have rows of things, the old traditional way we planted, but we're going to kind of mix things up a bit and not save any room. We're going to fill it all in. I hope
Is this are these like repeatable cells, or is there like a scaling where we would just expand the zone E, for instance?
I think it can be either way. That's the cool thing about it. And the one thing I'll say, in any plan that you do, it's going to change by next year because pollination and everything else, plants move. They don't stay where they're put. I guess trees don't move, but everything else is going to move a little bit. So you'll constantly be changing what you first had on paper. I've heard that from many good sources.
Oh, cool, thank you.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Is DC City aware of the harm of LEDs? I heard about a plan to shift while city over to LED.
Yeah, I can tell you that even tonight, the ANC where I reside, I think was going to be bringing up this issue. There's a huge overhaul that's going to be taking place. And a neighbor nearby in 2018 wrote a big piece in the Forest Hills Connection about it. And I think that we are, as a community, hoping to raise some of these issues again, or want to understand what the plans are for all the new lighting, because this is supposed to be here for the next generation, like for 15 years. And, I think they're supposed to be directed straight down, which will be a good thing. But I don't know if they're going to have curfews or motion detectors. So I can say that this could be a major concern for those of us trying to save pollinators.
Wow, that's good.
I don't have enough information about what the city is doing yet, and we don't know if there's still a lot of opportunities to, for example, reduce the wattage, like if they can get down to 2,700, whatever the wattage is, instead of the blaring bright stuff. That would make a huge difference too. Plus, some people are saying with technology, maybe there's something in the works right now that could be a major, better one to use, and maybe we should take a little bit more time to make sure we can get it a little bit better.
Great, thank you. That's what are some good edible native plants that help with pollinators?
Almost all the herbs. I can just say the herbs are super, and I mix them in all the time up and down Connecticut Avenue. So dill, fennel, the mint family, onions. I mean, you can. I don't know if those allium I think of, but let's see, so lemongrass keeps away mosquitoes as well, and wasps. They actually got rid of a wasp's nest that was right near the Montessori school. But pretty much almost everything I still rely going into looking at the resources so I can see if they're A, native, and B, helpful to some pollinator.
Perfect, thank you. So many great presentation, Kathy. This was great, all caps. So people are very excited, but I'm just running through those and getting to the questions. Are there planting permits from the city needed? Is there a permission process from DC Gov to plant into these green spaces?
So what you need to do is how DC has set this up is whoever, and I forgot to mention this, whomever is the landlord in front of that space is the person you have to check with. So I worked with Van Ness Main Street, and we worked with the businesses in the Van Ness Main Street area. And then Montessori School came out and said, can you help do our area too? Because they own the school, or whomever is the landowner. It may even be people renting, but whomever is the person in charge of that property that is right adjacent to the tree boxes is what you need to talk. That's who you need to talk to. And so again, working through partners can help take care of that. With the alleyway, with all the big pots I had, Mark Furstenberg with Bread First was happy to put them in the parking lot where there was absolutely nothing. And so we created a little pervious surface area with all the pots around the parking lot in the back of Bread First. When we lost the tree, it seemed like it was no man's land right near Calvert Woodley, but Calvert Woodley has been thrilled that we've been planting right in their area to make it much more attractive. So you just have to talk to whoever the owner of the land is. And that's why I highly recommend working with partners. Now, if you have your own yard, you can convert half your lawn as recommended by Doug Talamay to create a national home park. This is what we can do with the private land that's on people's home. I live in a co-op, so that's a little bit different. And those are different battles on the committees that deal with those decisions. But all we can do is try to educate on what kinds of things should be done and what kinds of things should be removed, which I'm working on.
I think you've already, thanks, Kathy. Sorry if this was already addressed, but if I wanted to start a pollinator garden in front of my house, do I need to ask permission or can I go guerrilla?
And is this on in a tree box or where?
If I wanted to start a pollinator garden in front of my house, they don't say. Madeline, are you still on? Would you like to clarify your question?
Sure. Yeah, I think I was just trying to get at the permitting question that was just asked. So
Okay.
You already answered it.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
if it's on your property, you can do whatever you want. That's for sure.
Right.
And I think if you're the landowner in front of your property, you can still do whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the only thing that I've seen problems, there's a wonderful guy who's homeless in my neighborhood who's planted a lot of vegetables. And I think DC doesn't want to see vegetables planted in those tree boxes because they could attract rodents. And so that's the no. Now, herbs are great. And I did see someone's note about mint. Yes, mint is very invasive. So that's not a good one. You can put that in a pot. The mint family is great for pollinators, but it will spread like crazy, like wildfire.
I think that's all we have, unless anybody has any final questions. There are a lot of comments for you, Kathy, so I encourage you to go back and read them if you can. A lot of, compliments, and everyone seemed to really have enjoyed it.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. Are you able to share those spreadsheets you were discussing?
I can share a whole bunch of these, and I have them cut every which way. I think it would be helpful if you tell me what I have them for shade gardens. I have some on just trees and shrubs. I've actually done, I'll just be honest, I've done this for any neighbor who wants help to convert to plant native stuff. So I find out what they have, meaning, are they in shade? Are they in sun? And I make them their own list. I mean, I can do that, but I can share the ones I've done. And I just have so many. So it's almost, you tell me what you want, I'm happy to share. Or I could also try to do the best of the best. I could try to give you the top 30 or 40, because this has taken time. But I mean, you have to go from many different sources. Again, Missouri Botanical Garden is the absolute best place. And I've just taken their one pager, taken all the data that deals with the height, the water needs, the care, the spread, the bloom season, and then created things from that. But I'm happy. I feel like I have, you can see I'm not a business person. My time, I'd rather share it with as broadly as possible. So I'm happy to share that. Yes.
I was gathering those exact variables So I'll send you a follow-up email and we can go
Yeah,
from
that's
there.
very cool. And I'd be happy to do that for anyone else who's on the line here too.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Kathy's favorites.
Kathy, I'm sure other people would love to see those spreadsheets as well. Maybe you could compile your favorite, maybe top 5 list for.
Yeah, and the thing I was saying, it was I can do it like by, because sun is a huge difference. So it's really like, the right plant for the right place. And if you've got no sunshine, then that's a whole different list. But
I have a question.
yeah,
I'm looking at at that matrix garden.
yeah.
Is there a reason why certain plants are planted in certain places? Is there a theme around, like, good? Thank you. I can see your answer makes sense. That's
Yeah.
thoughtful that you said no.
I can tell you that really what they're calling this whole new movement, I think they call it the new perennial movement, is the opposite of traditional gardening. So it's like, choose a lot of what you like, or in my case, I'd say choose a lot of native ones that you like, and you can mix them up. And that's probably a good thing. And maybe you'll see that, let's say K here, let's say what that is. Of course, I can't see because it says Culver's root. Now, maybe that K place on the top back there, now maybe they didn't get enough sunshine, and maybe I have to move them over where the L is, where the palm sedge is. Now, I don't know how big that guy is, but I do sometimes move my plants because they have not done well where I put them, where I thought that was the best place for them. So there's some that are really moody and don't like to be moved, and lots of other stuff. They're very forgiving. And even like, I love, for example, Black-eyed Susans, and you can divide those babies and move them all over the place. And you may even decide that I had Virginia creeper that I put in, that's really big vine that can go around trees. And it didn't get enough sun for it. It needed much more sun. So I moved it to another part of the garden, thriving, and the birds love it. It's really a great vine, and it really does take off. It can go 50 feet up. So I think the point here is that you don't have to do a lot. And it's not like there's, I think it's easier to see the artwork, honestly. I'm like, I have to lay it out in the garden. So I can do this on paper, but I go out to the garden and I do it with the volunteers when we all come together. And, what do you think about how does this look? And how does that look? There's no right or wrong way to do it. I think the point is that you mix it up. It's not like we're just doing, this is where the sunflowers will go. This is where the, the columbine is going to go. You can mix it up and move it around, and maybe only have one of a kind over here. The columbine is all by itself over here, but the matrix, I think, has more to do with it. You can it's kind of like it's a jigsaw puzzle. You can put the pieces wherever, and you sort of have a frame with whatever hardscape you've got, or where you have to have a path or the doors to open for a car door or whatever, but you don't have to do patterns that repeat. And I had a very sunny long block where I had a lot of yellows because I planted in the fall, a lot of sunflowers because it was near Muchas Gracias. Just thought, Mexican flavored colors, Mexican sunflowers and stuff. So that was very different than when we were close by another time of the year when we started the pollinator corridor up by Calvert Woodley. And that had much more shade. So it's not like it's my cookie cutter pattern. It's what can I say? It's flexible. It's like clay. It's like your artwork. Does that help?
Yeah. That was excellent.
Good.
You're an excellent presenter.
Good.
Kathy?
And I can just tell you that, we are doing our spring gardening the last week, starting the last week in March through Easter in April, and up and down the corridor on Connecticut Avenue. And I welcome anybody who wants to come and do it firsthand, see it firsthand, because this stuff is not rocket science. As you guys know, as master gardeners, it's trial and error, but it's, and then just choosing the right stuff in the right place, you can do it.
I was actually just going to ask you about that. What volunteer opportunities you have coming up? Can people reach out to you? Will you send them
You can
out?
definitely reach out to me, and I can work one-on-one with people too, up to a reasonable amount. But I volunteered a number of other places, Hillwood and Tregarron and Peabody School on Capitol Hill and UDC Roof Garden. So
I've got a little bit of my week worked out, but I'm happy to work directly with people. And some of the master gardeners, maybe people who were on today, have helped out already and have done, I keep learning more from all of you too. So it's an ongoing thing, but it's really rewarding. I'll just say that. And people really appreciate it because it's beautiful and we're helping make the world a better place. And I think we need that now with COVID.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. That was an incredible presentation. So many compliments. Somebody actually just joined at 6:59, so you can see they really wanted to be here. I will share the recording, the handout, the lists, the PowerPoint presentation. I'll follow up with everybody who registered for the class.
Okay.
Kathy, if you have any volunteer opportunities coming up, I will also share those with the group. Thank you so
And
much.
they can have my email address, which I think is on this thing too. So if they want to reach out to me, I will do those other spreadsheets. I think you've got some of them, but I'll do more.
Okay, perfect. Yes, and I'll share your contact information too. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Have a wonderful night and happy gardening.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.